I'm Kirk Hansen, the Executive Director of the Markkula Center for Applied Ethics at Santa Clara University. As part of our work in studying how ethical cultures in corporations are created and sustained, we want to talk today with a very effective internal audit executive about the growing role of internal audit in influencing the ethical culture of the company and the relationship between internal audit and the ethics and compliance officer. We're here with Mark Orton, Vice President for Internal Audit of Agilent Technologies. And we're talking about the role of internal audit in managing the ethics of the corporation, in creating an ethical culture. Let's start there, Mark. Okay. What's the role of internal audit in the process of creating and sustaining an ethical culture in the organization?
Yeah, it's a great question, Kirk, because I think a lot of times if you were thinking about a traditional internal audit organization from years ago, you would say that that organization would want to be very independent and kind of distant from that culture and uphold more of an objective view and not want to be part of a culture that you can actually influence and change through ethics. And at Agilent, we really have made some good progress in getting into more of the consulting arm from an internal audit organization. And we really see ourselves as an extension to the audit committee, the audit finance committee, the board of directors, and being the ears and the eyes and really helping set the right culture for the organization. If you think about how many people in a company get to see your board of directors in action, it's a really low number. But how many people get to see our internal audit organization out working with the business? It's a much bigger number through that. So we really can be role setters. We can actually help see, is the culture working through our procedures. In our organization, we actually give anonymous surveys out on the street as we're working with the business to be able to evaluate independently how things are going, because they know who we are and it doesn't come from a corporate office or a governance organization, and they see that more localized as we go out there and work with them. Now, so I think there's a big role that we play there.
Agilent has a compliance ethics officer as well as internal audit. How do you work with the ethics officer, the compliance officer of the organization? What are your separate roles?
Yeah, so really our roles come together in a lot of different places. So when you think about who owns setting our code of conduct, we call it the standards of business conduct, who looks at evaluating how that code of conduct's working, who owns setting the future for where that code of conduct goes. Those are the types of things that are owned by our Chief Ethics and Compliance organization. But for us, we get to really participate with them and help evaluate, because we do risk assessments and objective views, and ethics is at the base of all of that.
So do you do ethics risk assessments?
So yeah, ethics comes into a place of how that risk assessment is working. It's not a category like you would say governance or operational or financial, but we do talk about the ethics at the base of all of the 8 areas where we're doing our risk assessment evaluation.
And what about when there's a whistleblowing case or a report to your internal reporting system? Is that an ethics officer responsibility, or is that an internal audit responsibility?
It's both. So with Agilent's process, we really do take an approach where Tim O'Leary, who runs our compliance and ethics organization, and myself, when hotline information comes in, the first place both of us go is to talk to each other. He has a different expertise. I have a lot of the tools and people on the ground. So we're really working together to understand how we want to approach that. Who do we need to use, if anybody, from the outside, and really putting out the playbook for how we're going to go after understanding the situation.
How does the audit committee of Agilent think about its role vis-a-vis ethics? Does it think it has a relationship just with you, or does it have one with the ethics and compliance officer as well?
Yeah, so the board of directors has it with both of us. I think they're trying to build more of a relationship with the compliance and ethics, and I think that's a really good thing. I've already had that. When Sarbanes-Oxley came about, it was kind of dictated. A lot of corporations had already built a lot of that role, but it was nice to have Sarbanes-Oxley there put that in front and kind of make it a requirement for stock exchange participants. So yeah, they are getting more and more questions for the compliance and ethics area, and I think continuing to build that informal relationship and working with that office is definitely where our board is going. And you know, much of my role, I see myself, like I said earlier, is that extension to the Audit and Finance Committee. I would say Marie, our general counsel, and Tim are also feeling like they're more of that extension and really, you know, helping be the eyes and ears as well for the Audit Committee.
Thank you.
External auditors promote corporate governance by making sure the subject company's report are accurate, true, and appropriately fair reflection of the company's status. In the process, if anything is discovered that looks fraudulent, then it is directed to management. The external auditor should seriously consider stepping away from the review if management ignores the issue or tries to cover it up. But it is not the external auditor's role to be the fraud investigator per se.
My name is Miranda Chook, a CPA. Internal auditors audit internal controls for a particular company, so that is why they are internal to the company, rather than being external auditors who will audit a company's financial statements. Many internal auditors actually have a CIA, or Certified Internal Auditor designation, after they meet certain education and testing requirements by the Institute of Internal Auditors. Internal auditors, as I mentioned, audit the controls and internal controls of the company. And frequently, the work of internal auditors can be relied upon by the external auditors in reducing the extent and timing of their tests.
Internal
and external
and
auditors.
external auditing, yes.
Sure. Well, external auditors generally have a very specific scope to look at a company's financial statements. They're very narrow in scope of looking at financial risks and providing attestations over the accuracy of those financial statements. They clearly are not responsible for finding every fraud in an organization, and they're generally, they look into the past. So they'll look at maybe a fiscal year during their audit, again, with the sole scope of providing an opinion on the financial statement. Internal auditing, on the other hand, has a much broader scope. They're more forward-looking. They look at things like the adequacy of design of their internal processes, as well as the effectiveness of those processes. While they do look at financial risk, they also look at strategic risk, fraud risk, operational risk, those types of things that are, you know, also important to an organization. So, I think simply stated, you know, a sound internal audit function can really help an organization serve as its corporate conscience. Having an independent and objective function that challenges management's assumptions in a healthy way.